Hey, it's been a while since I've gotten on camera to do a little somatic movement moment for everyone, but I've noticed myself repeating some ideas to a few of the people who are 60 plus years old in my life recently. So this is dedicated to them, but it also goes out to all of us who are younger than 60, because if we begin to practice these principles while we're younger, then they'll be in place for us to rely on once we get older, and they'll kick in if and when we need them. So the idea I want to introduce today is how we can use different parts of our body to assist us in getting up off of the floor so that we don't get kind of like stuck bracing in our lower back or in pain in our knees because we've got too much weight loaded on the knee. So yeah, a couple of ideas that I just wanted to put forward to help with that. And I'm gonna keep this short. So first things first, I just want everybody to find their hip creases. So the place where the thigh and the pelvis comes together, when you bend your legs, there's a fold or a crease in here. So just find the lateral edges of your hands, line them up with your hip crease. Toes pointing forward, legs lined up just narrowly right underneath your hip. And just play with bending and really softening in those hip creases, right? Really softening in those hip creases. So this is kind of like, I don't know the names of yoga poses. Is this Utkatasana? I'm not sure. But there's this pose, right? So this is like this pose in yoga. But what I'd really be curious to see if people could find is whether they can get into this kind of a deep hip crease and not be holding in their lower back, not be holding or locked in their lower back. So the ideas I'd like to introduce to facilitate this kind of freedom in the hips is first to really reach forward and back from the head and the tail. So reach the head and the tail away from each other. So as you're bending your knees into this hip fold, the head and the tail are actively reaching away from each other, right? This is gonna create some nice length in the low back. Yeah? And you're dropping your weight into your legs. And when you push up, you keep that reach of the head and the tail. So you don't lock up in the low back. So just play with that a couple of times. Add the reach of the head and the tail away from each other as another dimension, a spatial dimension that is aiding in this movement. And this can happen when you get all the way down to the floor and get up off the floor too. Head and tail reaching away from each other. Just try that a couple of times. I can lower this so you can see what it's like when I actually am getting up and down off the floor. Right, so creasing in the hip sockets, transferring my weight into one leg, and reaching head and tail away from each other to get down on the floor. Head and tail away from each other. So I have this backwards reach, front and back, right? That disperses the load on my knee, so it's not all down, down, down into the floor through my knee, but I have this widening spatial reach to make it easier to get up off the floor. Reach. So just playing with that a little bit. And then when you want to add another layer on top of it, another thing that is probably going to be really tricky for people to find is, can you soften your abdomen? Can you soften your low belly? Right, so we're going to go back to that initial squat position, and I just ask you to notice now, put your hands on your low belly. What's your low belly doing? Is it sucking in? Is it glued to your low back? And what would it take for you to soften your low abdomen and let the weight of your belly rest on your thighs? And then you keep this added layer of the spinal reach. Now I'm getting so much more activity in my legs. My weight really drops into my legs when I let go of my belly and I let my weight pour forward. Another thing, oh yeah, see, I was a little bit in my back too. But then I add that reach, soft belly. Whew, and then my legs really get the workout that's intended for them, right? And because I have that spinal reach, my spine is still active by letting go of some of that overactivation of the abdominals. I'm not endangering the low back because I'm activating the spine by lengthening through it in two directions. Okay, the last thing I wanted to add into this exploration is the idea of giving your weight to the front of your lower leg, your shin, right? So this is part of getting up and down off the floor. So we've got all of these elements now, right? I'm gonna shift onto one leg to get up off the floor. I have a soft belly with my hip crease. I'm reaching my spine, and I just wanna make sure that I'm not keeping my knee too much held right above the ankle, but I'm actually letting my weight pour into the front bony support of my lower leg. That actually, I mean, it feels so good, right? That gives me some of the support of the front of my pelvis too, in terms of bony structure as I'm getting up off the floor. So, shifting weight forward, soft belly, hip crease, reaching the spine. It's just something I wanted people to play with a little bit. It's just an exploration I wanted to offer. Some ideas that I think will save your knees and your low back. And I thought it's good to have these kind of supportive measures in place, especially in the colder months when we tend to tighten up. And some people will like throw out their backs doing really easy things, just like picking something up off the floor. So keep the hips nice and juicy. Don't overlock the abdominals. And activate the spine. You can activate your bony structure for support, lengthening through the spine. You'll get actually core and abdominal support through that lengthening, right? Because it's gonna kind of fire up all of the intrinsic muscles that are along the front of the vertebra in the spine. And finally, getting the fronts of the legs involved so that all of the dense bone tissue is weight bearing and supporting us as we get in and out of the floor. Super cool if you have any young people in your life, like babies, just watch them playing. Watch them playing, getting in and out of the floor. You will 100% see the spinal reach that I'm talking about, and you really get a sense of how it's assisting them. Anyway, that's my offering for today. I hope to do more of these.